Chapter 26 of Pemaquid. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by ShrimpPhish. Pemaquid, A Story of Old Times in New England, by Elizabeth Prentiss. Am I in earth, in heaven, or in hell? Sleeping or waking, mad or well advised, known unto these, and to myself disguised. The strongest plume in wisdom's pinion is the memory of past folly. Mrs. Strong calls on Mrs. Woodford. Miss Woodford ain't to home this afternoon, Mis' Strong, and Ruth, she's gone with her, and ain't to home neither. Come into the kitchen and sit right down in the chimbley corner, and I'll have a couple of sticks onto the fire in no time. You've been to Boston, haven't you? Well, the wonderfulest things has happened while you was gone. That 'ere blessed baby ain't no more Miss Woodford's grandchild than I be. What do you think of that, Mis' Strong? I'll tell you all about it. Baby begins to cry. There now, come to its own, Kezzy, so it shall. Snuggle its little head down onto her and keep still while she talks to Mis' Strong. She's Kezzy's onty-donty minister's wife, and baby must keep stilly, so it must. There now, eat its little thumb and make believe its little thumb is its ma. Well, as I was a-sayin', one mornin' I went to Frank Weston's room, and lo and behold, he wasn't there. He had been better'n usual for a week. His fever had gone, and his mind had come back, though he looked like a livin' skeleton. He came out to see his baby, and, "Kezia," says he, "you seem fond of that poor little creature," says he. "So I be," says I. "Would it be a great trial to go on caring for it till it is old enough to thrive in my clumsy hands?" says he. I turned as red as fire. "You don't mean that Ruth's to have a baby, and poor old Kezia have hers tore out of her heart by the roots?" says I. "Do you really love the child?" says he. "Would it pain you to part with it?" says he, his lips all of a tremble, for he hadn't got his strength back by no manner of means. I bursted out crying at that, and I don't know what I said, but he took the child in his arms and kissed it over and over again, and then handed it back to me and went out. But pretty soon he came hurrying in, and pressed it to his heart, and put his hand on his head, and blessed it. "I meant to give her to Ruth," says he. "But I see she has her hands and her heart full of her own child," says he. "Kezia, did she marry Josiah Stone?" says he. Massy sakes alive, goody gracious me, I thought I should drop. "Marry Josiah Stone?" I screeched out. "Our Ruth? You are crazy." "Who did she marry, then?" says he. "She ain't married to nobody. 'Tain't her baby. It's our Samuel's." He sot right down in the fust chair he see, as if he was shot. "I am going to give you a piece of my mind, Frank Weston," says I. "What business had you to bring Juliet Pickett's young one to our Ruth?" says I. "Did you suppose she'd touch it with a pair of tongs?" says I. "Juliet Pickett's young one?" says he. "Why, Kezia Millet, do any of the rest of them imagine that this is her child?" "Of course, we never thought nothing else," says I. "Why should we?" says I. "Didn't she run off to get married to you?" says I. He actually began to pound himself on the forward, as if he meant to beat his brains out, and then he all but fainted away. When he came to, "The sooner I leave this house, the better," says he. "There's terrible mistakes all round," says he. "I did not marry Juliet, and this is not her child. I must write and explain everything. I declare I could have danced for joy. I cut up the baby, and if I kissed it once, I kissed it 40 times. And to think I'd ever slept with a bolster between me and it because of Juliet Pickett's being its ma. On the whole, I believe I did dance about the kitchen, for I didn't see Frank go out, but go he did, without any more words. It was a fortnight before we heard from him, and then he wrote a long letter saying he had not married Juliet after all. It seemed she'd played the hypocrite and made believe she'd met with a change, and at the last minute he found her out and charged her with it, and all the love he thought he felt for her melted away. She declared she'd never go back to Pemaquid to be everybody's laughing-stock, and he suspected, though he did not know it, that she never let her ma mistrust that she wasn't married. At any rate, she said she never should tell her. After he got his eyes open, he went away and kept school. He knew our Ruth would never look at him again, and there was a good, pious little girl in the family where he boarded, and he got married to her. But she was very young and very sickly, and when the baby came, she died, and he tried to take care of it himself. You know he was dreadful fond of children, and la, what with mismanaging the little thing and losing his sleep night after night, he got wore out. He hadn't any money to leave it, and knew it would die if somebody did not take extra care of it out of love, and so he made up his mind to bring it to our Ruth, confess all his sins against her, and beg her to take pity on the child. But the journey was too much for him, and he just dropped half dead at our door. Miss Woodford, she'll show you his letter when she comes home. We all had a great time laughing and crying over it, and we was all sorry that you had gone out of town, and so couldn't laugh and cry with us. And Miss Woodford, she's always said she couldn't cotton to it, and didn't believe it was her grandchild, and our Ruth, she said she didn't want 2 babies, and wouldn't rob me of mine, and break my heart all to pieces, and she knew I'd bring it up as pious and consistent as she could. And me and you, Mrs. Strong, will watch over it and nuss it, and it'll grow to be as plump as a partridge and as chirp as a robin redbreast. I'll take it in the arms of my faith and carry it to him who loves to heal the sick, and ask him to make it all over brand new. And he will. You see if he don't. Sings. We've had our ups, we've had our downs, but now it's plain to see that through them all we have turned out a happy family. The squire's got a pious wife that he can fondly love, and more than that, 2 blessed saints who live in heaven above. Miss Woodford has her cares, 'tis true, but she has learnt to rest her cause with one who never can forget her heart oppressed. And she's a happy woman now, intent on doing good, and pious as the day is long. I always hoped she would. And there's our Ruth, as rich and proud as she can be, but then she can't a candle hold to one as rich as me. Why, who'd have thought I'd ever have a baby of my own, that with the eye of faith I see, began to run alone? We was a happy set before, to doubt it would be sin, and then, as if it weren't enough, 2 babies was throwed in, and I have said 100 times, to say it I have a call. A house without a baby in, it ain't no house at all. Frank Weston explains. I owe it to you all, my dear and honored friends, to clear up the mistakes into which we have all fallen. In the first place, then, let me confess that, unconsciously, to myself, I had become inflated with spiritual pride, and was, therefore, ready for a fall. Satan knew only too well my weak points, and he sent a beautiful tempter to work, if possible, my ruin. I indulged myself in the notion that a young and inexperienced fellow like myself could, safely for either party, plunge into a pious friendship with a young lady. There was honest purpose in my conduct, but that does not excuse me. We are responsible for our mistakes, and I must account to God for mine. At the same time, I was sinned against. A plot was laid to dishonor my betrothed in my eyes, and I, who never should have injured her by so much as a thought, became more or less alienated from her. Fool that I was. My behavior to her was most base and unmanly. I have no excuse to offer for such conduct. Almost in a frenzy of that dangerous mixture of sentiments, love and religion, I engaged myself to a being whom I believed to have become, thanks to my influence and instructions, a ripening saint. You will hardly believe that, amid all this folly, I still kept up a life of prayer, through that the divine hand saved me at the 11th hour. Our wedding day was fixed, our arrangements all made. A few hours only separated me from a fatal mistake. Secure of having gained her end, my future wife threw off her disguise and presented herself before me in her true colors. I had lost all comfort in religion, but its deep-seated, invincible principle remained. He to whom I daily offered my puny, unsatisfactory prayers came to my rescue now. To unite myself in marriage with one who scorned him was no temptation. It cost me nothing to part with her, and since I had shown myself so weak, so unable to take care of myself, there was but one course to pursue: to tear myself away from her seductive influence at once and forever. However dangerous to her soul was the sundering of ties, I believe I was doing the only thing left me. A man so weak and human as I could not have saved her, and we should have plunged down together into an abyss of evil. In our final interview, I gave her as solemn a warning as a mortal just escaped from eternal death could give to one in danger of it. But it was of no avail, and on that occasion I was told that Ruth had engaged herself to Josiah Stone, and was forever lost to me. I found employment as a teacher in a remote town, and a certain peace. In the family where I boarded there was a pious little girl. I cannot explain to you why, at the end of a year, I married her. I shall have to appear in your eyes as one who counts marriage a very trifling thing. Yet this is not true. She never missed anything in me. She was satisfied and happy. Then a little feeble infant came to me, and she stole away, to be gone forever. I tried to be both father and mother to the child, and night after night walked my room with it till I broke down. And if I died, what would become of the child? It might die too, but it might live and suffer. My wife had no mother, no sister. What should I do? I knew a being who never thought of herself when needed by others. I knew my misconduct would not close her heart to my child. I determined to appeal to her, and then lie down and die. You know in what a condition I reached your house. You all know how you sheltered, how you nursed me, how you brought me back to life. Then I saw Ruth, radiant and happy, with a child of her own, as I fancied. And when that error was corrected, learned to my amazement that you all believed me to be Juliet's husband, and that that puny infant was her child. I assure you I have never seen nor heard from her since we parted. I know she never meant to return to Pemaquid, and as you hear nothing from her, I presume she has married and found a home elsewhere. As to my child, it has nestled its way into as honest and warm and tender a heart as ever beat. How Kezia nursed me at times during my long illness I never can forget, and as to Ruth's magnanimous treatment of one who had cruelly wronged her, it would be an impertinence to speak of it. God will bless and reward her. I never can. As long as Kezia Millet is fond of my poor little motherless child, and you are willing to tolerate it, I shall be thankful to leave it in her charge. If I regain my health, I shall expect to meet its expenses myself. This is a man's portion in this life. He gives money. Woman gives youth, health, beauty, time, heart, and soul. Will the twain fare alike in the world to come? I have resumed my theological studies, and if I ever become a minister of the gospel, it will be as one who has known the torment of a furnace of temptation, has fought with the tempter, and been smitten almost unto death with his fiery darts. What lessons of deep humility I shall have to teach, what warnings to utter against spiritual pride. And now, having humbled myself before God, I humble myself before you all, entreating your forgiveness, as I trust I have obtained it from him. Frank Weston.
Mrs. Woodford reads Frank's letter to Mrs. Strong.
What do I think of it? I think it is a sincere, straightforward letter, and that he has suffered far more from shame and remorse than he has made any attempt to tell. Fancy how one possessed of the principle of love to God agonizes when all his joyous emotions disappear, and he finds himself standing, stripped and bare, before the all-seeing eye. Some souls have to go through this process. I think Frank is going to make an exceptionally useful man.
I know too little about Christian experience to form any opinion about it, but it is an inexpressible relief to hear of Juliet. If Frank had only had courage to marry Juliet, who knows what he might not have made of her?
He had no right to do evil that good might come. Here is the dominant nature. He would not have lifted her up. She would have dragged him down. How did this letter affect Ruth?
I think the fact that he did not marry Juliet was a great delight to her. It made a difference about the baby. And I confess it is a relief to me to know that I am not that child's grandmother. I am not fond of young children. And this one is so unsavory, poor thing. Kezia proposed to go home to her mother's with it, as it was such a wearing thing to us to hear it cry so much. But I would not listen to it. The good creature deserves every indulgence at our hands, and we all agree that she is as much one of the family as any of us. I don't know who among us all is the happiest. Sometimes I think I am. And then that it is the squire with his deeper religious life, and then that it is Ruth with her baby, or Kezia with hers.
But women are meant to be wives as well as mothers.
That may be, but Kezia would chase out of her kitchen any man who mentioned matrimony to her, and Ruth would make a splendid minister's wife, but she is contented as she is, looking after the church with you and Mr. Strong, and reveling in her baby. Yes, and we are beginning to grow old, and what would become of us without our Ruth?
Yes, I know, but here is Frank Weston emerging into 10 times the man I ever thought or even dreamed he would. Ruth will get attached to his baby inevitably, though she does not think so now. She has to write to him every now and then about it, and on this common ground they will meet.
She does not love him, and I do not believe a dead and buried love ever comes to life again.
Well, perhaps I agree with you, but a slumbering affection may wake up and arise refreshed and strengthened.
I had no idea you had so much romance about you.
Do you know where Frank is?
Certainly.
Can you give me his address?
Certainly, but I won't have any matrimonial project put on the carpet. We could not do without our Ruth. She is the very tower of our strength.
I have no matrimonial designs on her, but for my own satisfaction, and because I have loved Frank dearly, I want to have this mystery of his marriage cleared up.
You will find it the simplest thing in the world. He had a faculty of shifting his affections about at will.
I shall hold my judgment in suspense until I hear, at any rate. You cannot object to that.
Oh, no, but you will see that I am right in my opinion of him. End of chapter 26.
Chapter 27 of Pemaquid. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by ShrimpPhish. Pemaquid, A Story of Old Times in New England, by Elizabeth Prentiss. Reverend Mr. Strong to Reverend Mr. Beach. Dear brother, in reply to your favor just received, I am happy to say that Frank Weston's little child is in good hands, and doing as well as could be expected. I had reason to suppose he was kept informed as to its welfare. Will you now permit me to ask, if I may do so without intrusion, what were the circumstances of his marriage to your daughter? His relations to my wife and myself, and another family in my parish, justify, I think, our wish for light on a subject very painful in some of its aspects. We want the right, if he deserves it, I mean, some of us do, to reinstate him in our affections. If, however, for any reason, you prefer to make no reply to this letter, I beg you will feel perfectly free to do so. I remain, truly yours, A. Strong. Reverend Mr. Beach to Reverend Mr. Strong. Dear brother, I hasten to reply to your letter in regard to my beloved son-in-law, Frank Weston. He came to this town to teach in our academy, which is a flourishing one, designing at the same time to pursue a theological course with myself. I soon became deeply interested in him. He struck me as one who had trodden a wine-press of suffering, although he never spoke of himself. It is thus God often trains the soldiers whom he means to put in the forefront of the battle. As I became more interested in him, it occurred to me that it would be pleasant to have him in my family. This consisted of a young daughter and myself. We were lonely, and found Mr. Weston's society very congenial. That it involved any danger to my daughter never crossed my mind. I looked upon her as a mere child. But before many months had passed, I became aware that she had conceived an enthusiastic affection for him, and I could not blame her. A more attractive young man I never met. He did not, however, occupy himself with my poor little girl, or see what I saw, and I should not have seen it myself but that I have been her mother as well as her father ever since her birth. I let things drift as long as I could. Then I had to speak. He was very much surprised and pained, and begged me to tell him if he had been guilty of any error in regard to my little girl. I assured him that he had not, but begged him, if he was heart-free, to think of my poor child as faultless and pure a young girl as ever lived. He then acquainted me with the fact that he had had dealings with young ladies that did him great discredit as a Christian man, and declared himself utterly unworthy of my daughter. He spoke with great penitence and humility, and only endeared himself to me the more by his confessions. Here was pure gold. It had been tried in a fire, and had come forth refined for the master's use. He proposed to leave my house at once, but I would not consent. The mischief, as far as my daughter was concerned, was done, and I loved him as a son. Yet I reproached myself bitterly for not realizing that Alice was not still a child. If he left us, however, she would know that her secret was discovered, and be overwhelmed with shame. It seemed best to think of some plausible excuse for sending her away, poor child. The proposal to depart came, however, from herself. She was a girl of high principle. The moment she discovered the state of her heart, she began to meditate on the best means of retreating from a position that made her blush in the solitude of her own room. All this I learned only after her death. She had great faith in prayer, and she prayed constantly that she might be delivered from this trial, or be permitted to find refuge away from home. At last an occasion offered, and hiding a sore heart under a smiling aspect, she asked my leave to go. But I was less courageous than she. I could not part from her. I began to flatter myself that Frank could not live long under the same roof with so lovely a character, and not come in time to appreciate it. She was perfectly modest and retiring. There was nothing to disgust and everything to attract him. Yet it cost him a great struggle to decide to make her his wife. It was 3 months before he could make up his mind to take any step in the matter, and it was not till he had spent a year under my roof that the marriage took place. On his side there was no romance, but he made a devoted and kind husband to my child, who, I am sure, suspected nothing, and was happy in him to her dying day. After she had gone, he devoted himself to the babe like a woman. It slept by his side, he fed, he dressed it with his own hands. In vain I pleaded with him against a course of conduct dangerous for both himself and the child. His whole soul seemed to concentrate itself on that frail life. He fought manfully for it, risking his own, for that active brain of his needed the sleep of which the little creature deprived him. Of course, he soon broke completely down. This occurred in my absence at the funeral of my father, and when I returned he had disappeared with the child. Imagine, if you can, my distress. My fear was that the ordeal through which he had been passing had partially dethroned his reason, and that he had put an end to his own life and that of the child. Every effort was made to find a trace of him, but in vain. Brother, if I had had no faith in a kind, wise, overruling Providence, my own reason would have given way. 3 months had passed, and I mourned him as one dead, when late one night, an emaciated, pale, and almost lifeless man, he returned to me. His account of himself was vague, and confirmed me in the idea that he was suffering from brain fever, and not accountable for what he did when he set forth on his pilgrimage to Pemaquid. Nor was he fully himself on his return. His mind ran on one idea, namely, that I was about to slay his child, and that he must take it away out of my reach. Even after his health began decidedly to improve, this idea haunted him, and he refused to tell me where he had placed it. I had only learned that it was at Pemaquid, and in your parish, when I wrote you. Frank's health is now entirely restored, but he is very restless and uncomfortable since he parted with his little babe. Every time the mail comes in, he rushes to the office, hoping for news. Can he not be informed regularly how it thrives? Truly yours, Theron H. Beach.
Mr. and Mrs. Strong read the foregoing together. Well, husband, I must own that I am greatly relieved. It looked as if it made next to no difference to Frank whom he married, and it is plain as day to me that he never has got over his old affection for Ruth. But what can she mean by neglecting to let him hear from his child? I thought she would write every week or two, and that gradually things would stand on the old basis. I always loved Frank, and I never liked the idea of Ruth's being an old maid.
Now, my dear, don't let your heart run away with you. Let Frank alone. Ruth is happy and contented as she is, and very useful in the church, and a world of comfort at home. And I do not think she could ever so thoroughly forgive Frank as to marry him.
That shows how little you know her. When she was a mere child, she took for her motto the words, "Give and forgive." You know how she responds to every appeal for help, how exactly like her father she is in searching out and relieving the cause she knows not.
and I believe she is just as generous with her affections.
Now, my dear romantic little wife, do let well enough alone. Don't go and mix yourself up in any matrimonial scheme whatever. By the by, they have it all round in the parish that Lawyer Snell offered himself to Kezia Millet, and she drove him off with her broom, and now he is after the widow Green.
I'm afraid Joshua Snell cares too much for money. It is a pity, for he has some excellent qualities.
And as if Kezia would marry the Lord Mayor of London if it involved her parting with that child. I declare her devotion to it is something perfectly beautiful. Its own mother could not have had a purer, more unselfish love for it. Well, I'll step in to see how it is, and agree on some method of keeping its father acquainted with its condition.
Ruth's Journal. Kezia's spirit is a good deal broken by loss of sleep, and after coming nearer to a quarrel with her than I ever did in my life, I have her baby in bed with me, and mine in a crib by my side, and I have got to loving it so that I dread her getting strong and well again and taking it from me. I think it cries less with me than it did with her, and it certainly begins to grow pretty. I do believe that to sleep with a baby each side of you is just the nicest, sweetest thing in the world. Dear little soft, helpless creatures, how happy I am! Mrs. Strong has been here and reproved me for not writing to the extra baby's father, who, she says, is suffering great anxiety about it. Certainly I have been very thoughtless and selfish. I was so taken up with my own blessed lot that I entirely forgot how lonely and sorrowful his life must be. Oh, I know what I'll do. I'll get Mother to write to the baby's father. She is always so sweet and kind about everything now. And really, I have a deal to do. I wonder whether Kezia's baby has any name. I have asked her, and she shrinks from it just as I did. But Kezia hit on such a capital plan that all difficulties disappear. Kezia is bright, there's no doubt about it. "La, let the baby write to her pa herself," quoth she.
Frank's baby to her papa. My dear papa, I am tied into the high chair by Kezia's apron, and am going to write you a letter all by myself. When you went away, I used to cry a great deal, especially at night, but Kezia never got out of patience with me, and would get out of bed and walk up and down with me till it is a wonder she did not drop. One thing was, my clothes were not warm enough, and then they were too long and tangled my limbs up so that I did not know which was which. I wear a red flannel dress now with pretty black dots all over it, and have shoes and stockings on my feet, and I sleep in flannel nightgowns and on a flannel sheet. I have got a silver porringer of my own, and have bread and milk in it, and I have 4 little white teeth. Kezia loves me to distraction. Do you suppose she will ever give me back to you? I don't. And there is another thing. What is my name? Kezia calls me Scrawny, but I think it is only for fun. And some of them call me the extra baby. I think myself I ought to be named for my own mama. Your baby.
Papa's reply. My dear little baby, you are named for your own mamma. Your name is Alice Neil Weston. I am very thankful that you have learned to write, and if it is not asking too much, I hope I shall hear from you once a month. I love you very dearly, and if I ever have a home of my own, shall coax Kezia to let you come there. You do not know that your papa is a minister now, and has preached a good many times. His heart is in his blessed work, and next to his work, his heart is in Pemaquid. Your loving papa. Kezia visits the parsonage. Well, now, Miss Strong, our Ruths took both them children and ain't left me none. But, Kezia, she only does it for your good. You were getting all worn out from loss of sleep. That's just a notion of our Ruth's. I got down in the mouth one time, for fear it wasn't consistent to love a fellow creature as I loved that baby, and our Ruth thought my spirit was broke with hardship. And then there's another thing. I always could see through a millstone, and I see right through Frank Weston when he was here. He'd give his 2 eyes to make up with our Ruth, and if he gets a chance, he'll come and carry her off, and I shall lose her and my baby both to onct. Now, I call that borrowing trouble, and don't you see that you can't lose the baby unless a wise Providence wills it? Of course, I wouldn't fly in the face of Providence. One of the best things about a Christian is that he is not afraid of evil tidings. He enjoys what he has as long as it lasts, and when it is taken away, he enjoys God. Take my word for it, he will never let anything befall you that you cannot justify him in doing. Well, it's strengthening to hear you talk. You must know all about it after all you've been through. I expect my faith's been dreadful weak, and this poor wailing little infant has got such a grip on my feelings that it nigh about kills me to see it suffer. And yet I'm such a selfish creetur, I'm a-doing all I can to keep it alive, bless its little heart. Well, goodbye, Miss Strong. I won't hinder you no longer, for you have all the troubles in the parish laid right onto your shoulders. Come, Scrawny, we'll go home, and when we get there, I'll sing to you. Miss Strong, she's made the burden light that weighed upon my heart, and made me see that from my babe I could consent to part. The very hand that strikes a blow wipes bitter tears away. When earthly joys and comforts fly, the Lord will be my stay. Now, precious baby, go to sleep upon my faithful breast. Forget your weakness and your pain. Sleep on and take your rest. I loved our Samuel and Ruth, but not as I love you, for they were well and did not need both love and pity too. O little sad and tired face, upon my knees I pray, that he who infants dearly loves would take your pains away, or else, how can I say the words? From heaven come marching down, and take you up to be with him, and wear a martyr's crown. Yes, there are infant martyrs there, and with the eye of faith I see them smiling at the words the loving Master saith. So, little pilgrim, sigh no more, your pangs and patience bear. Your path is rough and flinty here, 'twill be all glory there.
Baby's second letter to Papa. My dear Papa, I am a year old today. Do you remember that? I have had ever so many presents. The one I like best is a great black dog. I smiled when he put his cold nose up to my face. Then I heard somebody burst out crying, and I was frightened and thought I had done something naughty. But everybody kissed me and said it was such a relief to see a smile on my poor little sad face. So then I smiled again, and there was more crying and kissing. I watched the other baby running about. He isn't a baby, but a great boy, and began to think I should like to run about too. I did pull hold of the leg of the table and get up onto my feet, but Kezia set up such a scream that I thought I had done something naughty, and so sat down again. They all say that I do not look like you, and so must be like my own mamma, who must have been lovely. Mr. and Mrs. Woodford are very well and very happy. So is Kezia. She gets a good night's sleep now, and the color is coming back into her cheeks. I send you my love, and am your baby, Alice Neil Weston.
End of chapter 27. Chapter 28 of Pemaquid. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by ShrimpPhish. Pemaquid, A Story of Old Times in New England by Elizabeth Prentiss. All this, and heaven too? Ruth's Journal. Kezia seemed so restless after I stole her baby from her that I have lent her my little Samuel. So now we have put the crib up into the garret, and each goes to bed armed and equipped with her charge. Meantime, I have grown so fond of baby Alice that I don't know but I love her almost as much as Kezia does. As for father, he makes no difference between the children. He considers himself grandfather to both. Whatever is going to become of us all, if baby Alice is claimed by her papa, I do not dare to think. Sometimes I fear Providence will settle the question by taking her to himself. That thought throws my soul into a most unholy toss. Mrs. Strong persuaded me to spend a week or 10 days at the parsonage, baby and all. I had a perfectly delightful time. Father Strong is like a shock of corn fully ripe. He has excellent health and is as happy as the day is long. I asked Mrs. Strong if she thought we should ever have to give up baby Alice. She said Kezia might have to part with her, but it was not likely I should. Then I said it was cruel to let Kezia take care of it when she was ailing and troublesome, and when she had nursed her into health, have the child snatched from her. As to that, says she, it is 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. I don't see but you take as much care of her as Kezia did. And don't you see that the Reverend Frank Weston's daughter is not to be brought up in a kitchen? I had not thought of that. It was to you he brought the child, she went on. But there were 2 facts in the program. One he was ignorant of, and one he could not foresee. He expected to die and bequeath his child to you. Don't you see what a high opinion he had of you when he selected you to hold this sacred trust? And if he had died, should you have hesitated for 1 minute to accept this trust and all the self-sacrifice it involved? But he did not die, and what was his embarrassment to find you, as he supposed, married and with a child of your own? Then Kezia's extraordinary affection for the baby led him to do the next best thing he could do, leave it with her. It would have been the death of it to expose it to another journey. Of course he had to yield to circumstances, but if the little creature lives, as soon as she passes beyond babyhood, she must be in your charge, not Kezia's. But perhaps her papa will marry again. In that case, he might not need Alice. My dear, he will need her. And don't you see the simple, natural way to solve this problem? How Frank can reclaim his child and yet not take her from you? I tried to think of a way, but couldn't. I advise you then, she said, gradually to attach Kezia to little Samuel and attach Alice to yourself. Do it very gradually, so that she will not perceive it. But Samuel should not be brought up in the kitchen any more than Alice, I said, quite puzzled. Why, it will be the old story over again. Kezia was all the mother you and your brother had till you went to your grandma's, and he was sent to school. Don't look so puzzled, dear child. I should not have spoken a word, but that Providence has already spoken first. You love baby Alice, for aught I see, just as well as you do little Samuel, perhaps better, for the bird that we nurse is the bird that we love. I said I began to love her most tenderly the night I took her to sleep with me. Well, now, you and Kezia had both better leave off saying mine and thine. love the two children together, just as a father and mother do theirs. Well, I forgot all this talk in a great surprise that met me when I reached home. Mother had packed me off to the parsonage while she had my room made into a sort of earthly paradise. It had been papered and painted. There was lovely new furniture. There were pictures on the walls and a flower stand covered with beautiful plants, all in bloom. There is not another room in Pemaquid to be compared with it. And I never dreamed that Mother had such exquisite taste. How disagreeable it must have been to her to live so many years among our homely old furniture. Oh, and there was a beautiful bird in a cage, singing away like one without a care, in a great globe full of goldfish that went darting about like little flashes of lightning. And to think that it was Mother who had all this done, while she left her own room as bleak and bare as ever. I could hardly stand it. Why should I, of all creatures in the world, be so loved and cared for? Well, I know what I shall do. I shall just pack Father and Mother off on a journey, and turn their room into fairyland. Kezia goes home on a visit. You see, Mother, Miss Woodford says to me, Kezia, says she, you go home and make your mother a visit. Well, I knowed I couldn't take my baby with me, though I wanted you to see it dreadful. So says I, Mother used to be awful fond of our Samuel, and she'd be proper glad to see his little young son, who's his pa's living image. Well, Miss Woodford, she's growed so agreeable that I believed she'd let me take the squire along if I'd asked her. Why, Ruth is the one to ask, says she. Of course, I knowed that all along, but I knowed she'd like to be asked all the same. Well, now, ain't this little young'un just a copy of his pa? But then you ought to see my baby, such a poor little white lamb as it is. Only I'm all the time in a toss for fear its pa will take it away. And, Mother, I tell you what, I made an idol of that 'ere child, and when I found it out, I fasted and prayed and prayed and fasted and was so sorry for my sin that I got wore out. Our Ruth, she thought I was wore with broken nights, and nothing would do but she must take the screaming idol to sleep with her, so that I could rest. But, law, Mother, I couldn't rest with sin on my conscience, so I used to set up on end in bed, a-pleading with the Lord to make up with me and give me back my peace of mind. And at last he did. But he said as long as Ruth's strength held out, I had better let her keep my baby nights. For you can fast from a baby, says he, just as you fast from meat and drink, says he. Do you think there's any harm in praying in bed this awful cold weather if you sit on end? I wouldn't undertake to pray a laying down any more than I'd break a commandment of purpose. Of course, I always pray by the side of my bed, night and morning, with nothing but my nightgown on, no matter how cold it is. That's mortifying to the flesh and keeps down the body wonderful. I tell you what, about 4 o'clock in the morning, my room being on the north side of the house, it takes nature and grace combined to say your prayers, especially when the snow beats down the chimbley and catches you by the feet. Now, Mother, you just lop down in your old sofy and rest yourself, and I'll get dinner. You ain't tired? Well, I didn't suppose you was, but I should think you might make believe, just to please me. Still, I suppose you'll want to be following me around to hear me talk. There, you may grind the coffee if you want to, only do it easy, so as not to drown my voice. You see, Miss Woodford has growed awful fond of our Ruth, and she says to me one day, says she, I've a good mind to fish up Ruth's bedroom beautiful, says she. What's the use of that, says I. Ain't her room comfortable, says I. I like to see a pretty young girl with pretty things about her, says she. But what's the use, says I. What is the use of white lilies, says she, and what's the use of green grass, says she.
Ask the cows, says I. But wouldn't it taste just as good if it was as red as strawberries, or as yellow as buttercups, says she. But think how our eyes would ache if it were, says she. And I've set my heart on fitting up Ruth's room, but she must be got out of the way first. I'll ask Mrs. Strong to invite her to the parsonage for a couple of weeks, and make a fine surprise for her, says she. So off she goes to Boston and buys all sorts of things. Why, every time the stage come in, it brought boxes, and I don't know what all, and everything was cleared out of Ruth's room, and painters set to work. And it beats all nature what elegant things was put into that air bedroom. I never seen nothing like it, and you never seen nothing like it either. I kept my eye on the squire, a-wondering if he'd think it consistent to make such bowers of bliss in this vale of tears. But he never said nothing, but went round rubbing his hands and looking awful pleased. And I declare, when we came to make up the bed, if there wasn't 2 handsome George Rex blankets ready to put on it, and a white quilt. I don't think I could compose my mind to pray amongst such finery. But our Ruth, she's different, and when she came home she cried for joy, only she said everything was too nice, and Miss Woodford was too kind. Well, says I, if you can't be happy in this beautiful room, you can't be happy nowhere, says I. Happy? She cries. Why, Kezia Millet, I could be happy in a dungeon and wretched in a palace. And then she went to her bookcase and takes down an old book and reads out this here. The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven. Now who can make head or tail of that air? How could heaven be hell, or what's more contrary to nature, hell be in heaven? Well, says I, all beat out. There ain't nothing like that air in the Bible, and it does say there that having food and raiment we oughter be content. And it don't uphold an elegant carpet, nor elegant furniture, nor George Rex blankets, nor nothing of the sort. And I mistrust such things as making it too agreeable here below for us, pilgrims and strangers as we be, travellers at the very best on't. Miss Woodford, she laughed, and says she, Neither does it say anything in the Bible about roast turkeys, or mince pies, or cranberry tarts, and a host of other things your soul delights to set before us. The fact is, hardly 2 people agree about its teachings on minor points, and the main thing is to agree on vital points. And I am sure you and I unite on those. As to George Rex blankets, how could they be in the Bible? And surely it is right for Ruth to sleep warm. So she went on argufying like a lawyer, which she had ought to have been, and though Satan can quote Scripture, I never can at the right minute. The fact is, she went on, you are a papist at heart, and I wonder you do not wear haircloth next your skin. To think of your poor old Kezia being called a papist! But it was done so good-natured and kind-like, I didn't feel riled at all, only struck up so that I couldn't speak if I was to suffer. You Pemaquidders, says she, are all alike in one respect. You think God hates beautiful things and beautiful employments, but who is there in all the universe that has made such myriads of exquisite things as he has? And do you suppose he is displeased when we admire the works of his hand? Look at these flowers, look at this bird, and listen to his wonderful voice. Look at these goldfish. Was it by accident that they were formed in beauty? Oh, you don't know what a new world I live in since I began to love him. And the tears come rolling down her cheeks. There, Mother, you've no call to go to crying. I wouldn't cry as easy as you do for anything. So Miss Woodford, she went on, and says she, I have done so much to make Ruth unhappy that I can't do enough to please and console her now, says she. There, I've got everything on to bile, and we'll have a biled dinner. And now I guess I'll put Samuel on to the sled and haul him over to see the neighbors. At any rate, I'll give him a ride. Oh, no, I'll set the table first. And so you think there ain't no harm in praying irregular, setting on end, as long as I pray regular on my knees? And you don't see no harm in our Ruth's having an earthly paradise in her bedroom? Well, I'm awful glad, for our Ruth ain't one of the kind to have her head turned easy. But Satan this he knoweth not, and he has climbed to yonder spot, and, like a spider in her hole, he's watching careful for her soul. Aha, 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 quoth he, I to Ruth Woodford have the key. She'll love her new possessions so that tight she'll cleave to things below. Short prayers she'll by her bedside make in place of those that made me quake. Her Bible and her hymn book, they will by degrees be tossed away. No tears of penitence she'll shed, but she will feed her bird instead. Yes, all she'll know of saintly showers will be to splash them on her flowers. Well, Mr. Satan, have you done? Is this poor stuff the web you've spun? Ha ha, it's now my turn to laugh. You think you know too much by half. Do you suppose a girl that had an offer from a likely lad, and give to him a love more true than the contempt I feel for you, and yet consistent could remain, when crawling, creeping in you came, and tried to wean her heart from heaven, and furthermore, when 7 times 7 a furnace was lit up, and she flung in its greedy food to be, and she could instantly begin to kiss the hand that throwed her in. Did you suppose your chance was bright to catch her then and hold her tight? Weeping endured a night, and then the morning came with joy again. Yes, all her heart ran over with joy, a clasping of her baby boy. But prayed she less for love of him? Did her strong faith grow dull and dim? Oh, Satan, I'm ashamed of you. After all this to hope to do, the maid a mischief with the things, Miss Woodford, her peace offerings. Mrs. Woodford sees Mrs. Strong. Was Ruth as much pleased as I expected? Yes, she was delighted. Kezia was a little troubled at first. She was afraid to see Ruth enjoy herself, lest she should cleave too much to things below. Nor could she see any use in having birds and flowers and fishes and pictures. So we laid our heads together, Ruth and I, and agreed to send the good creature home for a week, and take her room in hand. First, we had it painted. Then I went around to the neighbors' garrets, as I had already done for Ruth, and bought old furniture that had stood idle and useless for years, and had it repaired and varnished. Then I took 20 yards of new rag carpeting of old Mam Hughes, and we put that down, and, last of all, I put in a stove. That was Ruth's idea. She said baby Alice cried much less at night when with her, and that it must be because her room was warm. And when I think how much the good old soul prays, and what blessings she thereby brings into this house, and how many hours she has spent in midwinter walking her room with that crying child, I feel really hurt at my thoughtlessness in not giving her a fire long ago. Then Ruth, who is ingenious and handy about such things, made bright, warm curtains, had a bookshelf put up, and arrayed books on it, and made a pretty little table cover, and, last of all, hung on the wall some colored prints of scriptural scenes, which she used to think perfectly splendid, till I taught her better, and a cozier, sweeter room none need desire. So when the stage drove up, Ruth and I were sitting in it with our work and the baby. Kezia rushed in and sought us all over the house. At last the baby set up one of her shrieks, and that drew the good creature into the room. At first she was so wild with joy at getting home that she did not notice anything. When she did, she fell back into the nearest chair and burst out crying in such a tempest that poor little bewildered Samuel began to cry too. "Well," she said at last, "me have a fire to say my prayers by, me have handsome curtains, me have elegant prodigal sons and praying Samuels and good old Elijahs a-hanging round my room. Why, I shan't never want to go to heaven. When I get my invitation, I shall hang back and say I've got so much to live for. Well, if you pamper up this way, some awful thing will happen to keep me down, for I have to be kept down dreadful. The baby, she'll die, or her pa will carry her off, or our Ruth, she'll get married. If it ain't one thing, it'll be another. Well, I'll fast entire once a week, and I'll fast partial once a week, and maybe I can keep this here beautiful room and my peace of mind, too." And then I suppose she fell to singing. Yes, but Ruth forgot to write it down, and now don't you think I am a happy woman? End of chapter 28.
Chapter 29 of Pemaquid. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by ShrimpPhish. Pemaquid, A Story of Old Times in New England by Elizabeth Prentiss. L'absence diminue les petites amours et augmente les grandes passions, comme le vent qui éteint les bougies et qui rallume le feu. Ruth's Journal. I thought I knew what trouble meant. I thought my heart had been broken all to pieces. Yes, into such little pieces that it never could be put together and be the same heart again. It only shows how little I knew. Baby Alice was now 2 years old and was running about and growing a little stronger. Somehow, Kezia and I were more taken up with her than Samuel, for he was a great, strong, hearty boy, getting into all sorts of mischief and wonderfully able to take care of himself. He never wanted to be held in our laps and told stories or to hear Kezia sing. All he wanted was plenty to eat and drink, and to get out of doors and race and tear and climb and go scampering into the neighbors' houses and hear and see everything that was going on in Pemaquid. Everybody knew him, and everybody liked him, and he knew everybody and liked everybody. But Alice was made to be petted. She would sit by the hour hearing Kezia sing. She would sit by the hour in my lap, wanting nothing but love for her pastime. It was not everybody who loved her. Many people thought of her as nothing but a puny, uninteresting child. But old Father Strong always said from the very beginning that she was not made of common clay. Well, dearie me, have I got to write it down? It was a day in July, and I went down into the orchard with both the children. Mother and Kezia had gone to the female prayer meeting, and Father was at the office. I sat down under a tree, cuddling Alice up to my heart, and feeling very peaceful and happy. Kezia and I had done saying my baby and thy baby. It was our Samuel and our Alice, and we were both felt the better for it. Samuel had been skirmishing round among the trees, and I had almost forgotten him, for though he is always getting into scrapes, he is always getting out of them. But now he came, screaming with delight, astride on a man's shoulders, and the man was Frank.
"My poor girl, have I frightened you so?"
he said, putting Samuel down. I suppose I had turned pale, for I felt faint. I got over it in a minute and said, "Alice, darling, this is your papa." She stretched out her arms to him, and he took her. But he looked at me.
Ruth,
he said. I was silent and distressed.
Ruth,
he said.
I never so much as expected you to look at the Frank Weston of past times. He was utterly unworthy of you. It is another man who comes to you now, with all the boyish love and admiration of his youth, and a new and better affection, and a more appreciative esteem than was possible in immature age.
He paused, holding Alice close, but still not looking at her. Have you no eyes for your child? I said at last, for the silence of that July afternoon was awful. He held her out now, and there was a gleam of love and pride in his eyes as he gazed at the lovely little creature. And I saw that this was indeed another man. But it was Frank I loved, and I did not love this stranger.
Ruth,
he began again.
You have never forgiven me. I should not have expected forgiveness from anyone but you, but I thought the child had been forming a new tie between us, and that you would come and help me in my work. My child, I was unfaithful to you for a time, and under dire temptation. But only for a time. You are the only human being with whom I was ever thoroughly in love. I had a passion for Juliet, an infatuation that passed for love, but it was all a delusion. The instant I saw her in her true colors, I fled from her as from a demon. But I felt that I had lost you forever, and under this conviction, a reckless man, looking for happiness no longer, but willing to give it if I could, I married this child's mother. This fact complicates my cause, I am well aware, but I am not afraid that he who reads the human heart counts that a deed ill done.
He paused, and there was another awful silence. If I had only been like Kezia, I could have burst out and put an end to it, but I could not speak. All the old wounds I thought healed were bleeding afresh. I looked away from him to a sight I usually delight to see, the men pitching the hay onto the cart, Samuel gambolling about, waiting to be perched on its top and ride to the barn, wild with glee. But the sight jarred now, and the tears began to stream down like rain. He came and tried to take my hand, but I drew it back and shrank away from him, and at last I could stop crying and speak calmly. Who did you consult before you came here? I asked.
God, and my own heart,
he replied. And no woman?
None.
Then I might have been spared all this pain. Any woman would have said to you, you must not go. It was now his turn to be silent. There came upon the stillness the cheerful voices of the men at their work, the sweet note of a bird, the harsh, yet not wholly unpleasant, cawing of passing cows. Best of all, the sound of wheels and Mother and Kezia driving in. Kezia left Mother at the house, drove to the barn, and came strolling out singing to herself. Kezia! I cried out. She stopped singing, and with 3 strides was at my side. Whatever have you been a-saying to our Ruth, Frank Weston? She shrieked out. Are you a-going to take away our baby, or what is to pay?
Nothing has been said about the baby,
he replied.
But I thank you, Kezia, with all my heart for the kind care you have taken of her.
You thank me? I ain't taken no more care on her than our Ruth has, nor loved her any better, except one spell when I made a graven image out on her, which warn't of no earthly use to her, and was a dreadful grief and pain to me. But it's no use for you to carry her off. Men ain't no more fit to bring up babies than cats air, and it's far healthier down here to Pemaquid than it is where you be, where they say you could cut the smoke with knives.
That is true,
he said with a great sigh. He was looking so steadily at the child that I got off softly and stole away. Oh, what made him come? Why did God let him come? Dear me. Oh, dear me.
Frank Weston calls on Mrs. Strong.
Why, Frank, is this really you? How you have changed. I can hardly believe that this is our boy Frank. Well, I should know you had been in deep waters if I had not been told it. And now you are a full-grown man, every inch of it, and the words hard work are written all over your face. You have come to see your baby, I suppose. Isn't she a sweet little creature?
I saw her in the arms of a sweet little creature whom I hoped to make her mother, but that hope has been dispelled, and I must go back to my work alone, and I richly deserve my fate.
You don't mean to say you have been making love to Ruth? Oh, why didn't you consult me about it first? Poor little thing. I can fancy how you have cut her to the quick. How you men do bungle about your work. What is the use of woman in the world if it is not to keep you all out of hot water?
I never dreamed of wounding her. I fancied she would be proud to find how, in the depths of my heart, I had been true to her, and I thought her one of the sort to love once and love forever.
Girls of that sort only exist in books. To have kept on loving you when she believed you to be Juliet's husband would have been both weak and wicked.
But she turned so pale when she saw me that I had little doubt she loved me still.
That is nothing to the purpose. The sight of you revived the old pain.
Did she suffer so very much then?
She suffered, but silently, and in faith and patience. No one saw any violent outbreak of grief after the first day, and later on there came the peaceable fruits of her grief.
But oh, how she cried this afternoon! Fancy, if you can, how a man feels when he witnesses such anguish and knows he has caused it, and is powerless to do anything for its relief.
Yes, you set all the old wounds bleeding, no doubt. I am sorry for the poor child, and sorry for you. Your love for her slumbered, and then awoke again. Her love for you is not asleep. It is dead.
You think there is no hope for me, then?
I am not prepared to say that, but there will be no manner of use in approaching her now in any character, much less in that of the Frank Weston of times past. Possibly her love for your child may plead for you in some distant future. At any rate, never approach her again without consulting Mrs. Woodford or myself.
I will not. I see that I have made an almost fatal mistake, and after all, it is not necessary that I should marry again. My people are very kind to me, and I am happy in my work. And if it is not presumption to say so, I know something of what Christ can be to a lonely and desolate and abased soul. I don't know, but every form of suffering pays, and I think I shall go back to my work more saddened and sobered by this experience, and so better fitted to be a son of consolation to other weary hearts. For everybody, sooner or later, takes his turn.
That is true, but if I were you, I would not be so much saddened by this event as chastened by it. There is all the difference in the world between these two results of trial. In sadness, there is a touch of self-will and intention to give way, but the chastened soul has thrown self-will overboard, and while it suffers, it is patient, it is courageous, it knows depths of sweetness in the midst of its pain, for it gets drops of honey out of the rock Christ.
It does indeed. It does indeed. I would not change my lot for that of any man on earth, however prospered. What internal evidence we have of the fundamental truths of Christianity, when our hearts faint for heaviness, and we are held up by an unseen power, as evident to our consciousness as if it were a thing to be seen or touched. As I walked my lonely room last night, it seemed too good to be true that I knew Christ and could preach him. I shudder when I think of my giddy boyhood and youth, and the danger I ran of making shipwreck of my faith. But now, Mrs. Strong, about my precious little Alice. What ought I to do? Take her away? You know how I love children, how delightful it would be to hear the sound of little feet in my study once more.
If you take her away now, I have not the smallest doubt you will lose her. But for the love and prayers of those devoted creatures, Ruth and Kezia, she never could have lived as long as she has done. And it would be an ill moment for Ruth to have to part with the beloved little one. Besides, your only faint chance of winning Ruth will be through the child. Don't you see that the moment you remove it, you lose all opportunity of communication with her?
Yes, so I do. But how am I to have news of my child? Is it likely that Ruth will be willing to write me any more letters in the baby's name?
Let me think a minute. Did she ever allude to herself in those letters?
Never. That was to me a hopeful sign. I thought if she were entirely indifferent to me, all shyness would disappear, and she would write mere business letters about little Alice with perfect freedom. But you women understand such things better than we men do.
I see no reason why Ruth should not go on issuing her bulletins the same as ever, so long as this does not oblige her to put herself forward in the least. She has an unusual amount of the rarest kind of sense in the world, common sense. She is not proud or vindictive. By this time she is accusing herself of selfishness in letting you see how she had suffered, and she will be glad, since she can do no more for you, to render you this little service.
I want to see my child once more before I go. Can it be managed?
Certainly. Kezia will bring her here, or take her to the cavern, just as you like.
Oh, there is another thing. Ruth must have talked a great deal about me, for Alice came to me the moment she heard who I was.
And why Ruth, pray? Why not Kezia? Besides, Alice is very confiding. She always would go to anyone who looked kindly at her. No, young man, your name has never passed Ruth's lips since the day she received your cruel letter. She forbade all of us ever speaking it in her hearing. She loves your child for its own sake, not yours. And as to the letters about her, it cost her a great effort to begin to write them. But after a while, I doubt not, she ceased to connect herself with them at all. It was pure communication, to her mind, between father and child. If I were perfectly sure you were worthy of Ruth, I might be tempted, perhaps, to speak a good word for you.
Let me assure you, then, that I am not worthy of her. I am utterly unworthy. I do not know where I ever got the assurance to come see her. But some of the letters she wrote in my baby's name, nay, in fact all of them, gave me the idea that they were written by one whose heart was at rest. And I hoped she knew how precious those letters were. Why, when I first saw her, sitting in the orchard, my eye overlooked my own child. I seemed to be a boy again, and she the little wild rose I knew and loved. But I deserve all the pain I am suffering and shall suffer.
There's Kezia now with the baby. I'll call her in.
La, now, Frank Weston, be you to Pemaquid still? We thought you'd gone. Well, I'm dreadful glad you ain't gone, for I was left to say things to you yesterday afternoon that I was ashamed of when I came to say my prayers. Anyhow, my bark's worse than my bite, and I was riled when I see our Ruth's face all swelled up with crying, and you that oughter been strung up as high as Haman, a-settin' there looking like a pictur'. You're handsome, I will allow, and dressed up as if you'd just come out of a bandbox, and if I express my mind too free, you must excuse my ways. I wouldn't hurt a flea a purpose, much less this onty-donty precious lamb its pa. La, I've sung to her about you till she could have picked you out among 100 paws, not for your virtue's sake, but to warn her against follerin' in your ways. Not to say that your ways ain't improved, for I see by your face they air. And our Ruth and me will bring her up in the fear and admonition of the Lord.
She shall be took to the Eternal Association and learn her catechism and her primer, and see John Rogers burn at the stake, and Xerxes a lying in his coffin, and Zebedee up in a tree as Lord to see. Oh, never you fear, but she shall know all there is to know. And I tell you what, you come to see her every summer, and I'll fetch her here, or to the tavern, or wherever you say, only don't you never come a-poaching after our Ruth no more. This here baby favors its ma, don't it? Anyhow, she ain't a grain like you. Ain't she a little picture? And the squire thinks he's her grandpa, and nobody can persuade him he ain't. And we just take the money you send us for her and heave it into the contribution box. Well, if you've done eating of her up, I'll be going with what's left of her. Goodbye, Frank. Goodbye, Mrs. Strong. Kiss your pa, Lambkin. You won't see him again for a whole year. End of chapter 29.
Chapter 30 of Pemaquid. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by ShrimpPhish. Pemaquid, A Story of Old Times in New England by Elizabeth Prentiss. Meeting thus upon the threshold, going out and coming in, going out unto the triumph, coming in unto the fight, coming in unto the darkness, going out unto the light. Isabella Craig. The years of old age are stalls in the cathedral of life, in which for aged men to sit and listen and meditate and be patient till the service is over, and in which they may get themselves ready to say Amen at last, with all their hearts and souls and strength. Mountford. Ruth's Journal. 2 great events have occurred here in Pemaquid that have given me something to think of besides myself. I don't see how God can be so good to me. Mrs. Strong asked me to come to the parsonage and take care of Father Strong while she was laid aside. There was not a girl in the village who would not have felt this, as I did, a great honor and delight. Ministering to him is somewhat like ministering to one of the old prophets. I went right away so as to learn all his ways, and never did I spend 2 more delightful weeks. He was nearing his 100th birthday, and his physical strength was well nigh gone, but his soul was as strong as a young man's. Yes, stronger, and he seemed to live in it, and to hold constant communion with the being whom he had loved and served so long. And this filled him with such sweet charity that though, of course, I could not tend him with Mrs. Strong's skill, and sometimes forgot things, and blundered in others, he always said everything was just right, and that he hadn't time to form a wish before it was gratified. And at last his birthday came, and he was 100 years old, and I was privileged to carry his dear little grandchild and place it in his arms, for there was another birthday in the house, and a life beginning just as his was going out. Tears of joy rolled down his aged cheeks, and he blessed the child, and then said,
I thank thee, O Christ, for the joy that has come to my sorrow-stricken children. Spare this little one, and let him grow up to be a preacher of righteousness. And now what wait I for but leave to go home to be with him whom my soul loveth? Lord, call me home today to be with thee in paradise.
I stood awestruck by his side a moment, and then took the baby back to his mother. Father Strong welcomed me with a smile as I returned to him, and asked me to turn him upon his side. I did so, and he put his hand under his cheek, looking as peaceful as a child. I leaned over him and asked him how he felt.
Delightfully,
he said, and fell into a gentle sleep. Mr. Strong came in repeatedly during the day, but there was not another movement, and just as the sun was setting, he drew his last painless breath. All we had asked was that he might live to his 100th birthday and to bless the child. It was not a death to mourn over. It was one to remember with sacred and solemn joy. And the little life that had just begun, how it claimed us all, how happy it broke in upon the household so long written childless. Father Strong's funeral was something quite wonderful. Ministers came from all over the state, and everybody in Pemaquid who was not detained by sickness or the care of little children was there. The men even left their haying and every sort of work to pay respect to the oldest and best man they had ever known or were ever likely to know. Alice is 3 years old today, and her papa has been to see her. He wrote to ask Kezia to bring her to the parsonage to see him, and did not come here at all, of which I was very glad. And yet I saw him, and heard him preach a wonderful sermon for a young man. Of course I should not have gone to meeting if I had known he was going to preach. They all knew it, but took care not to tell me. Am I glad or sorry that I heard that sermon? I think I must be sorry, for there is a lump in my throat now. And yet it is a comfort to see that the love I once felt for him was not wasted on a nobody, was not the idle fancy of a little country girl. He must be very much displeased with me not to so much as call. However, he may be engaged to some other girl, and so have forgotten all about me. In that case he will be taking Alice away from us. The thought is terrible. There are plenty of girls in love with him, I do not doubt. That is, if he often preaches such wonderful sermons. It sounded like Baxter and Owen and other old writers Grandma taught me to love. Grandma would have feasted on such preaching. And to think he did not even call. But I am glad he did not. And I am glad that I have kept writing to him about Alice. He is not the sort of man to be hampered with a girl's whims, and my reluctance to write to him about Alice was a whim. I think I shall have to spend a day of fasting and prayer. My head runs upon Juliet in a most unseemly way, and I have no right to look at second causes. It was God who separated me from what I loved too much, and it is He who has poured so much sweetness into my cup that I have often felt too happy to live. Still, he might have just called. And now here comes Kezia. I have kept out of her way hitherto, but now I am in for it. Well, Ruth Woodford, did you ever in all your varsal life hear such preaching? Why, it's laid me flat as a pancake. I don't feel no bigger'n a flea. All Pemaquid is afire about it, and you ought to have seen how awful fond he is of Alice, and how she went on about you. It was Ruth this and Ruth that, but he never said a word to encourage her. He don't look very rugged, and it wouldn't take much to upset him. What makes you so silent, child? Why don't you say nothing about that 'ere sermon? 'Tain't possible you hain't forgive Frank for the visit he made you a year ago. Well, you needn't be a mite afraid he'll ever try to see you again. He's as good as promised me he never will. You think he might have called here? Where would have been the good of that? You could like him as a friend? Pshaw, it's no such thing. When a young man makes a friend of a girl, it means he's going to court her. And when a girl wants to make a friend of a young man, it means that she's a-throwing dust in her own eyes. And men may preach beautiful and pray beautiful, but it don't foller that they'll make good husbands. In fact, it's often just the contrary. Frank Weston's throwed you overboard, and then you've had your turn and throwed him overboard, and kept his little lambkin besides. Pemaquid has grown so fast that the meeting-house has been enlarged twice, and now a new one is to be built immediately, and ours is one of the families appointed to leave our dear old church and become a part of the new one. It has been a great blow to us all. It will be impossible for us to love a new minister as we do Mr. Strong. Kezia has cried about it till the tears have worn 2 lines down her cheeks where the skin is off, and I can't deny that I have cried too. One has need of patience in this changing, evil world. But Grandma's lessons are ever repeating themselves in my ears. She could not endure faint-heartedness, and I will not give way now, though many things conspire to try my courage. When I was a little girl, I used to take it for granted that I should have children and grandchildren of my own. I see now that I never shall, but I have my dear young rogue Samuel, whom God only can take from me, and I have, for a season, this little miracle of sweetness, our precious Alice. But we may have to part with her any day. Well, one's life doth not consist in the abundance of one hath. What a blessed, beautiful truth that is.
Frank Weston to Reverend Mr. Strong. Dear Mr. Strong, you will excuse my troubling you with my affairs when I tell you that my health has broken down again. I made a mistake in undertaking such severe and varied labor as this large, growing church requires. My physicians insist on entire rest for 6 months at least. I am to try a sea voyage during a large part of that period. Of course, this is a heavy trial, and I am tempted to envy the ass and her colt, of whom it was said, "The Lord hath need of them." But though perplexed, I am not in despair. I believe the Master has yet something for me to do. So if you hear of any vacant New England pulpit 6 months hence, I beg you will bear me in mind. I have learned to cease from picking and choosing how, when, or where I shall pitch my tent, content that each day brings me a day's march nearer home. Not that I have any morbid desire to die young, only there shoots athwart my soul at times the blissful thought of becoming like Christ, in seeing him as he is. Remember me most kindly to Mrs. Strong, kiss the baby for me, and believe me, affectionately and gratefully yours, Frank Weston.
Mrs. Strong sends for Ruth. My dear child, here is a letter from Frank that troubles me. He has broken down in the midst of his brilliant career, and has had to abandon his important field of usefulness, never to resume it. But, dear Mrs. Strong, there is nothing I can do about it. I am very sorry for him, but there is nothing I can do. We shall see. In 6 months, the new meeting house will be done, and Mr. Strong says that if at that time Frank is in working order, he shall recommend the new church to call him to be its pastor. Now, could anything be more delightful? I always have loved him for his own sake, and for his love to my children, and this climate agreed with him perfectly, and Alice will be far better off here in our pure air than in a great smoky city. Dear heart, how your cheeks burn! But you would have to hear all this sooner or later, and I wanted the pleasure of telling you myself. Think now, your father and mother and Kezia won't have to give you up, and you will not have to part with Samuel or with Alice. Yes, it is going to be delightful all round. You are not so sure of that? We shall see. End of chapter 30.
Chapter 31 of Pemaquid. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by ShrimpPhish. Pemaquid, A Story of Old Times in New England by Elizabeth Prentiss. Frank Weston to Mrs. Strong. Dear Mrs. Strong, I have received your very kind letter with its seal of "Do come," and am most grateful for it. It has pleased God to restore me to health, But my physicians still agree that I must renounce the excitement and fatigue of city life and spend the rest of my days in some rural retreat where I can have plenty of air and exercise. The call to Pemaquid, if accepted, would fulfill all these conditions, and I hardly need tell you that my heart leaped up at the thought of living once more near Mr. Strong and yourself, not to speak of other friends. But my doing so is out of the question. I cannot trust myself, and I have other calls equally pressing from New England parishes between which I must soon decide. I have a friend, a noble fellow, whom I think just the man for Pemaquid, a man superior to myself in every way. It costs me an effort, however, to say this, and I have had a tussle with both myself and the devil before I could make up my mind to do it. For if Henry Althorpe is heart-free, and if he goes to Pemaquid and becomes Ruth's pastor, he will become her husband, of that I am sure. And I am mean enough, and enough of a dog in the manger to want to stand in his light if I can. Dear Mrs. Strong, you are like a beloved elder sister to me, and I have no one else to whom I can speak on this sore subject. But I do not intend to be nothing but a love-sick fellow, making the most of my discomfort. With God's help, I'm going to be a brave, cheerful man. Yes, and a happy one, too. For, after all, the human soul was formed for him, and he can satisfy it. I long to get to work again. Faithfully yours, Frank Weston. P.S. This mail carries my partial acceptance of a call to South Greenville. Keziah's opinion. Well, now, Miss Strong, you might knock me down with a straw. As true's my name is Keziah Millet, I thought Frank Weston was as good as settled in our new church, and our Ruth as good as married to him. Says I to Miss Woodford, says I, everything's turned out like a book, with a wedding to the end. Not that I ever see any sense in doing that. It reminds me of a story of somebody's meeting a hired girl and asking her where she lived now, and her saying, "La, I don't live anywhere now. I'm married." If I was going to write a book, I'd put the wedding on the first page. Well, I thought if anybody could help me to live consistent, 'twould be Frank Weston. He ain't way up in the clouds dressed in glory like Mr. Strong. He's got lots of human nature in him, and can understand and pity them as has lots of it too. Oh, Miss Strong, the conflicts and temptations I have. Even people like you don't know anything about it. Why, you're as even as the hem of my best apron, and it's calculated to exalt the flesh to have an even temper. Not to say that you're exalted, I meant people in general. I've always took notice that them as could hold their tongues never had no charity for them as couldn't. They think we fly out o' purpose, just as if people was corks and yeast bottles and could keep in if they'd a mind to, and the yeast all the time working powerful. Now, Miss Strong, I ain't never tempted to tell lies, and your nice, sweet-tempered kind is. They don't go to do it, but the first thing they know out it flies. They're apt to be kind of cowardly and afraid of being found fault with, and so they tell stories. Ain't our Alice grow to be a beauty? And with me and Ruth to bring her up, nobody'll ever hear her a-tellin' fibs, though she's got the temper of an angel. Seems to me we oughter call a town meetin' and send a committee after her pa, and bring him here whether or no. I expect it's all along of our Ruth that he won't come. Don't you? Mrs. Strong to Frank Weston. My dear Frank, the new church, which had set its heart upon having you for its pastor, can hardly believe that you have refused its call, and I can hardly believe that you have acted so hastily in a matter of such importance. My husband says South Greenville is not the place for you, as the character of the people requires a different man, and one older than yourself. and Pemaquid is growing apace and needs the best spiritual work. It is extremely considerate in you to furnish it with a pastor it does not want, because it wants you, and to provide Ruth Woodford with a husband out of hand when a husband is the last thing she is thinking of. It is true that in one sense it does not matter much in what part of the vineyard a man works, but in another sense it does. The people here know you as you never can be known elsewhere. As a crude boy sowing his wild oats, we loved you and forgave you. As a man who has put away childish things, we love you yet better. Now, the new church is largely composed of young people, whom my husband regards as his spiritual children, and he is very much in earnest about their future. And we both feel that you have been prepared for efficient work by the discipline through which you have passed, and have been led by Providence into the hearts of this people. As to Ruth, if you are the man I think you have become, you will not let her stand between you and a plain duty. She and Kezia are your child's devoted mothers. They are the most maternal beings I ever met. Neither of them needs to marry. Their hearts are satisfied with loving God and Christ and duty and little children. I will own that I clung fondly and for a long time to the hope of seeing Ruth your wife. But it seems plain to me now that, while she may learn to respect you as her pastor, she never again will allow her heart to be stirred by human passion. And once convinced of this, and that she has found her vocation, you will give your mind fully to yours. Thousands of human beings never marry. They cannot force Providence in this more than in any other thing. Leave your fate in God's hands, and set yourself manfully at work. Affectionately yours, Faith Strong. Frank Weston, in his journal. After a day of fasting and prayer, I have decided to accept the call to Pemaquid. It ill becomes a minister of the gospel to set his heart on a human maiden, and I have done with such folly forever. Mrs. Strong has removed my last scruple about settling at Pemaquid by assuring me that Ruth will never think of me again but as her pastor. I therefore resolve never to think of her again but as a parishioner. The thought of living near my precious little daughter is very refreshing, and so is the thought of living only for Christ, crucifying the flesh and all its affections. Nothing now stands between my soul and him.
Mrs. Woodford, in her journal. At last our poor young church is rich in its new young pastor. During the last few years he has matured wonderfully. It is delightful to hear him preach, and he is equally beloved by young and old. It is delightful, too, to see him with his little Alice, who is the only recreation he allows himself, with the exception of a daily romp with Samuel. Though he comes regularly every evening after tea to see the children, he rarely sees Ruth. They treat each other with great formality when they do meet. There is something unnatural about the whole thing. She has become so very dear to me that I frequently speak of her to him, as to others, as she deserves, but he never makes the smallest response, and invariably changes the subject. Then, when I speak with admiration of his sermons, Ruth says quietly, "Yes, Grandma would have liked them." Today I almost lost patience with this apathy, and said to her, "When you were so devoted to him years ago, he was not half the man he is now. How you can help loving him is a mystery." "Perhaps I do love him," she said thoughtfully, "just as I should Owen and Baxter and Bunyan, if they were alive. But it would be wrong and silly for me to think of him now as I used to think of him when he was a boy. Besides—" And here she stopped short, and would say no more. Kezia rushed in a few hours later with a red spot in each cheek. We all know what that stone girl is, and it wouldn't never do for our minister to marry her." "Of course not," I returned. "What put that into your dear old silly head?" "Why, Miss Jackson see him paying her attention after meeting this afternoon, and she was so riled that she labored with him about it." Half amused and a trifle uneasy, I gave him a gentle hint the next time we met.
"Paying attention!" he exclaimed. "Why, she was caught in the rain, and as I passed down the aisle and out of the meeting-house, I held my umbrella over her head, as I should do to any man, woman, or child I stumbled on. Is it possible that people are so wanting in sense that they can make a mountain out of a molehill? This is not my first annoyance of that sort," he went on. "Last week I met Miss Angela Daw, and she stopped to speak to me about a sick woman, and in half an hour the old deacon came and warned me that the parish would be greatly scandalized if I courted that venerable maid. And the day before yesterday I picked up somebody's old brass thimble at the sewing circle, and was twirling it about on the table, when a scrap of paper was placed before me by invisible hands, containing these words: 'That is Cindy Green's thimble that you are making so much of, and it looks particular.' Really, a man hardly knows which way to turn under such circumstances."
"The only way to avoid their constant repetition," I said, "is to take refuge in matrimony." In reply, he took from his pocket and handed me a book containing an engraving of a youthful disciple seeking and obtaining counsel from an aged man, in this wise:
"Say, where is peace, for thou its paths hast trod?" "In poverty, retirement, and with God." I am experiencing too much of this sweet peace to wish to exchange it for another, and I hope, dear Mrs. Woodford, that you will take pains to have it understood in the parish that marriage is the last thing in the world of which I am thinking. I have enough to satisfy any mortal: retirement, poverty, and God. I have besides a people who love me, and whom I love, and a little daughter whom I think the most winsome and engaging of children."
I still think, however, that a minister needs a home and a cheery, helpful wife. You are young and strong and well now, but life will bring its burdens and its changes, and you will need somebody all your own who will be to you what no other friend can be. An unmarried minister is a good deal like a bird with one wing, or a boat with one oar. I repeated a part of this conversation to Kezia, that it might get round the parish that our minister had no matrimonial tendencies. "Well," she said, "I'm beat. I thought he was just waiting for our Ruth to give in, but if he don't want her, there's plenty that does, and me and you, we love her wonderful, especially you. Does he think she ain't got book learning enough to make a good minister's wife, or what is it?"
Frank Weston, in his journal: "I am a free man in Christ Jesus, and haven't an idol in the world. Ruth is not now more cold to me than I am to her. I should even be willing to unite her to Henry with my own hands. But sadder than separation, sadder than death, is change. And while I no longer seek her as a wife, I feel that she will not even be my friend. It is now more than a year since I became her pastor, and I do not think that in all that time I have had a half-hour's conversation with her. And there are so many points where I need to consult with her about my precious little Alice. When I go to her house after tea, she is either absorbed in her garden or invisible. And this is not because she fears another pursuit from me, for I have made no secret of the fact that I never intend to marry. It is very unnatural and unpleasant, and grows more and more irksome. I wish she was my sister. If she were, how I should love to tell her all my thoughts and plans, and have her share in all my labors for this people. I would take a house and go to housekeeping, and we should educate Alice together. And in the reaction that follows my sermons, she would sympathize with and cheer me. But alas, she is not my sister, not even my friend. And when I boarded with the widow Cutter, she drove me nearly frantic with her tongue. And here at the Spencer Gleasons I am worshipped, waylaid, and waited upon and fed till I am frantic. How thankful I am that my study door has no keyhole and has a bolt.
Ruth in her journal. Of course, I could not expect my minister to think of me as he did that day down in the orchard, an ignorant, stupid country girl, and I never have. But I did not think the time would ever come when he would despise and almost hate me. I am sure he thinks I am in love with him, but I am not. I respect and esteem him too much for that, and realize how far he is above me till I ache. Oh, how heavenly minded, how devoted he is. His sermons are like the books on which Grandma brought me up. They remind me of her every Sunday, and then I miss her and feel lonesome. Miss Tabitha Gleason says he is so far above the world that he does not know roast beef from bacon, and that she is afraid he is all soul. I wish I knew whether my management of Alice suits him, but of course it doesn't. Kezia has pretty much given her up to me and takes to Samuel, but though he is my own dear brother's child, and just like him, and Alice is no relation, I am ashamed to own that I love her best. What can be the reason? Susan Stowe says it is because she is our minister's child. Susan grows spiteful as she grows older, poor thing. I dare say she doesn't know it, and perhaps she has her trials and cannot always rise above them. Perhaps I have spiteful fits too, but I hope not. Yet when I think that Alice's papa is likely to take her away from me to live with him, I feel torn to pieces. Rather than part with her, I would go and be his kitchen maid. I should not mind working for such a good man and his lovely child. He can't say that I intrude upon him at any rate. I lock myself into my room generally when he comes to see Alice and frolic with Samuel. Samuel loves him dearly. He will always be a good boy if we tell him our minister shall know it. He was very naughty at meeting last Sunday, and one of the tithing men hit him hard on the head. That will teach him how to behave in the sanctuary. End of chapter 31.
Chapter 32 of Pemaquid. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by ShrimpPhish. Pemaquid, A Story of Old Times in New England, by Elizabeth Prentiss. Mrs. Woodford's Journal. Mrs. Strong came to see me today. She is a dear little bright woman, and our going to the other church has not disturbed our friendship in the least. "I want to talk to you about Frank," she said. "I do not think Tabitha Gleason makes him comfortable. I do wish he would get married and go to housekeeping." "He says he never shall," I returned. "Then couldn't you take the poor fellow in here? You have such beautiful housekeeping, and could make him so happy and at home here. He isn't one of the sort to make trouble, and as he is now, he would be a blessing to the house." "That is true," I said. "But Ruth?" "What about Ruth?" "Why, I do not think she would like it. I am afraid she has never quite forgiven him for the past. At any rate, she does not share in the enthusiasm the rest of us feel for him.
She always takes herself off when he comes, and when I speak of his sermons, she talks about her grandmother. No, I am sure she would not like his coming here to live, and I doubt if he would like to come. He and Ruth do not harmonize."
"It is very strange. I thought their love for the child would be such a tie between them."
"She never consults him about her management. He never volunteers any advice. Perhaps he looks down upon her from the elevation he has reached. I suppose if he ever did marry, he would want a woman of culture, a woman with literary tastes."
"Bless you, what good could literary taste do him? It wouldn't love him, or sympathize with him, or see that he was properly fed. No, Ruth is just the little affectionate, kind-hearted, motherly creature he needs. And what is keeping them apart, when that child ought to be drawing them together, I don't see. But if, as I suspect, there is a misunderstanding between them, we must hope it will be cleared up providentially. And now I must go. I take it for granted you are all well?"
"Yes, all but Alice. Alice is drooping a little."
"It is the weather. It's been so sultry for nearly a week now. Shall I look at her? You know I have been consulting a physician all her life. Why, Alice, darling, what's the matter? Don't look so mournful. You'll feel better by and by."
Frank Weston's journal. I said I had not an idol in the world, and in that spake I truly. But God has written me childless, and pierced my heart with a great sorrow. I sit here in my lonely study, longing to hear the little feet climbing the stairs, and trying to say, nay, saying, "Thy will be done." She faded away before we had time to feel uneasy. How I loved her! How I miss her! Patient little lamb, how sweet and docile she was through it all. Ruth seems stunned. I look to her as the one who loved my Alice best for sympathy. No one has given so little. But even this I must bear in faith. It is a bitter drop in a bitter cup.
Ruth's journal. How can I write? How can I eat and drink and sleep? I always thought it would nearly kill me to lose Alice, but I never foresaw that even a worse thing could befall me. But to see his agony, and not fly to take him to my heart, not to dare to speak to him, to write to him, to tell him how I ache through and through to bear everything, to save him a single pang. This is misery indeed. If God had only let me die and left him his little treasure, the light of his life, the image of his saintly wife. I wrung my hands and prayed him to spare her and take me. Over and over I besought him, but he answered me never a word. Why should this fervent heavenly spirit be thus dealt with? Was he not already 7 times purified? Had he made an idol of her? No, he loved God better than he loved her. She was all he had, and he justified him in taking her from him. Never did I witness such faith, such grand, such sublime submission. 'Tis the very Christian graces I admire and value the most. Let me have them too. Though he slay me, let me trust him.
Frank Weston's journal. Sharp as this blow is, I could bear it better but for Ruth's want of sympathy. Out of her wealth of flowers, she has not offered me one to lay on my child's coffin. Apt as she is at administering consolation, she offers none to me, and I should be so soothed if she would be to me as a sister in this time of my sorrow, put kind arms around me, speak loving words, support my drooping faith, pray with me and for me, and talk of my Alice to me. Speak of the home to which she has gone, Magnify Christ and fill me with joy in him. A man in trouble needs a woman to lean on. Dearly as she loved Alice, she is not crushed as I am. She is stronger, and she looks down on my weakness.
Kezia interferes. Now, here's just where it is, and I can't stand it no longer. Here you sit, and you a man, and a real good man at that, and you're a-pinin' to have our Ruth fly in by that 'ere winder and bind up your wounds. And there she sits a-wearin' and a-tearin' because she's achin' to do it, and dursn't. Everybody but me's as blind as bats. You be, and our Ruth, she be. You two love each other to distraction and have all along, and is she to speak first? I want to know. You needn't think I ain't got no feelin's 'cause I come and scold at you. I've cried my eyes out to think of you having to lay that sweet lamb away in the ground, and my heart, it will be laid low in the grave with her when you do. But now, don't you go to dyin' of joy. She ain't dead. She's been in a trance like Mr. Tennant, and she's come to and has eat hearty for her. And if she ain't been and broke the ice between you and our Ruth, my name ain't Kezia, and as the French woman said, what's the use of being a woman if you have to look at things when you don't want to see 'em?
Kezia sings one day in her kitchen.
Oh, what a mass of ignorance we mortal women be! How we refuse to walk by faith and walk by what we see! How many times I've cried for fear the baby it should die, and almost seeing her taking wing straight into glory fly! How often I have quaked with fear, lest on some dreadful day her pa should come with cruel hands and snatch our bird away! How often trembled lest some spark should fall in love with Ruth, and tear her from my breaking heart to dwell with him, forsooth. And how we all bemoan the fate that threatened us ere long, with loss of our dear church and blessed Mr. Strong. And now just see how things turn out. Kezia Millet, look, and tell me if it isn't like a story in a book. The baby, she ain't died, but growed into a lovely girl, with dimpled hands and rosy cheeks and hair that can't but curl. Her pa, he'll never take her hence, our Ruth will never go a single step from Pemaquid, and all who love her so. 'Tis true we all have had to leave our own beloved church, but 'tain't like Providence to leave his people in the lurch, and our new minister's a man the very stones can love. He's not an angel, didn't drop right down from heaven above. He's made of just such stuff as I and other mortals be. He's had to fight the world, the flesh, and Satan too, all three. He's had his falls as I've had mine. He's had his sorrows too. And when his people suffer theirs, knows what to say and do. A son of consolation he, and going everywhere, with strengthening words and kindly deeds, and love and tender prayer. The squire, oh how glad he is, to have once more a son. Miss Woodford thinks for such a man too much can ne'er be done. And Ruth, our Ruth, the mornin's broke for that dear soul at last. She's sippin' paradise to pay for all the woe that's past. A little robin ain't more plump, nor skips more light than she, yet she's a pillar in the church, and proper glad I be. Aye, there goes our new minister, them children on his back, and he, I do believe my heart, the merriest of the pack. Well, if to paint the happiest home on earth my hand was bid, I shouldn't be afraid to say, it is in Pemaquid. End of chapter 32. End of Pemaquid, a story of old times in New England by Elizabeth Prentiss.